Hello again, this is Lahiru. So in this video we'll be covering the next set of activities that we need to follow in the data service demo. So in the first part we covered how to create the data service and how to create different entities in the data service. So in this video we'll be seeing how we can use the entities we created in the UiPath workflows. So just to recap, if I'm to quickly show you. So in the first video we created two new entities called the student and student activities, and we created some test data to see how it works. So for you to access this data service, there are a few things that we need to follow. First thing is you need to create your or connect your assistant to UiPath Orchestrator through the interactive sign-in option. So how to do that, I have covered that in the interactive sign-in video. You can go through that and set it up. So once you have connected with the interactive sign-in, you can connect the studio with the entities we have created over here. So if you have studio open, uh, if you have the studio open, if you go to resources panel and click on this cloud options over here and click on refresh, it will refresh the resources that you have access to, and you can see the two entities that we have created over here, and it also says how many records that are available. As of now I don't have any records. So in the workflow I have uh, so in the workflow I have three Excel files which I am planning to use. If I'm to quickly show you, so for each student I have an Excel file. In the sheet 1 we have the student information, in the sheet 2 we have the activities of that particular student, uh, as we see here. So this student has activities, the previous student did not have any activities, and this is another one. So he has three activities. So we'll be using these three uh, Excel files to add this data into the entities we created. So why I have three Excel files is to simplify the flow, or so that I can focus on the logic that we need to use to connect and add the data into data entities we created. So the flow will be simple. So the first things first. So first I need to get the entities onto my solution. So on the project panel you can see an option called entities, but you do not see the two entities that are available in the data service. So how you can do that is you can get to manage entities on the top ribbon, and here it will show what are the available entities, and you can enable the entities or select the entities you need for the process and click on save. So whenever there are any updates after you add the entities into a project, it will show it in a different color over here. So all you need to do is save it again so that the changes will be applied. So let's save this for now. So it will be installed in the entities into your solution. Now if you check the project panel, you can see the two entities under data service demo, which is my solution name, and the two entities are available for you to use. Also you can see a small notification on the top saying that you need to install a different package to use it, the data services. So if you click on install package, it will look for UiPath data service activities, and as of now you only have the 20.8.1 preview, so I'll install that. So this will give you a set of activities for you to use to connect with the entities we have created. So if you get to activities panel, you will see a new set of activities under data service. If you expand, you have 5 activities. First one is to create new records in different entities. Second is to delete and get records by id, query the records, and update. So first we'll be using the first one. So to create the workflow, now I have 3 different files in an input folder. So I need to loop through that. So let's create a simple uh, set of activities to go through that. So I can use the assign, and I'll be giving the folder path directory.get files. So I'll be using the input data folder. So this folder is inside the same solution. So I'll be using only that folder name. So I'll be taking the folder file list into a file list array, and I'll be changing the data type to string array. And once you have configured that, next is you need to have a loop to loop through the files. So I can use a for each. I'll be specifying file list and changing the object type to string because the data file paths are in the string format. Now I need to read the data in the 2 sheets of each Excel file. So I'll be using a read range for that. So if you actually check uh, each file, you can see that I have 2 sheets, which is sheet 1 and sheet 2, that has the student data and his related activities. So I'll create that now. So for the file path, I'll be specifying item because it holds the file path, and the range is blank. So for sheet 1, I'll be saying this will have student data, and also I need to get the data from the sheet 2. So again, it's item, the range is blank, sheet is sheet 2, and I'll be having a different data table, student activities data. Now the next step is we need to add the data in this Excel sheet or in the data table into a variable, a rich data type of type student and student activities. So how do we create rich data types for these two? It's quite simple. So I will create the variable in the sequence code over here in the sequence scope. So all you need to do is click on the entity, drag it to the variables panel, and it will create that variable for you. And we just need to rename it. I'll say students, and let's do the same for students activities. Student activities. Now next is we need to initialize this variables, otherwise it will throw out errors saying that you are assigning it to an undefined variable. So we'll use the simple assign activity to do that. So I'll be using multiple assign. So I can say simply students and new students. Similarly, I can do that for the student activities as well. Right. Now I can get the values from these two data tables and assign it to the properties of students and student activities. So as you know, in the first Excel, or in every Excel, the first sheet has only one row, and in the second sheet there can be multiple rows. So I'll be using different approaches on these two. So over here inside the loop, under the second read range, I'll use a multiple assign again. So when you're assigning, if you check the resources panel in students, you can also see the data type of the fields that are available in the data service or in the entity. So based on this data type, we need to assign or convert the values that we are assigning. So in the first entity, which is the students, most of the fields that we need to assign is string. So we're looking at student ID, first name, last name, and age. Others are predefined fields. So how you can access these fields is by giving the students dot student ID. So this student is referring to the variable we have created over here. So it's the variable name. And once you give the dot and look for it, it will provide all the available fields. So since the first data table has only one row, I'll be specifying, I'll be using the, I'll be accessing the data without using a loop over here. So I would say student data dot rows. I'll be saying the 0th row because it's the first row, and in the 0th column we'll have the student ID, which is referring to this cell, 0th row and the 0th column in terms of data tables. So I'll do that. And so I have provided the student ID, next is the student name, the first name, and I'll be doing the same thing but specifying it as the second column, or which is the first column in data table column indexes. And I'll be doing the same thing again for the next set of columns. Students dot last name, which is the second, and the last column students dot age. And you can also see the data type over here, it specifies as string. And over here is the third index. So I have assigned the values to the four properties that I need to assign the values that I have. And what we have to do next is I need to create this record in the entity. So remember, we have two data sets and we have two entities that we need to populate, but the student activities entity is related to students using the student ID. So we first need to populate the students entity in order to populate data in the student activities respective for a student available in the student entity. So we'll first create this record, and to do that we just need to go to data service activities and use the create entity record. So I'll be using that over here right below. So for the entity type, we need to select which entity we are going to enter the records into. So from the drop down you can select if the entities are available over here, or else you can browse for the types. And if you expand the data service and data service demo, you will be seeing the entities. So I can select students, and the input record is going to be the students variable. So I'll be saying students, and we have an output record. So it's again of the type students. So this will return the data once you have entered, along with few other properties that we can use along with the related entities. So I'll be getting the output into the same students entity. So it will be overwriting the field I already did, variable I already had. And in the next data table, so this up to this point it will add the data into that particular entity. And now I have the second data table where I have the student activities, and it can have multiple rows, and we don't know how many rows will be there. So I'll be using a for each row activity right below this. For each row, and I'll be specifying the second data table, students activities data. And now again, since we have created the or we have created the new variable over here, I'll be not needing to do that again. So over here I'll be directly assigning the values into the variable using a multiple assign as we did over here. So again I'll be using multiple assign. So this time I'll be specifying the students activities. Again, that's the variable that I have created over here of student activities type. Student activities dot, the first one is the student ID. So look at this. Here the student ID is of type students. But if you check over here, the student ID is of type string. So why we have students over there is because it is the field that we use to build the relationship between the student activities and with the student. So this field has to be of students type, and that has to be of a particular record available in the student entity. So we'll be specifying that. So we already inserted one record for the first student, and that's the record that we need to refer over here for us to enter the activities related to that particular student. So I'll be specifying this output variable, which is the students, as the input for the student ID field we have in the student activities. So that will hold the unique ID and the references required to link with that particular record. And if you check the student activities or entity here in the resources panel, you again have the type as GUID, which is the reference of available in the student's entity for that particular record. And apart from that, the rest of the fields where we have is the activity name and registered date and the cost per month. So I can use the student activities activity name, which is a string. So I can specify row. So here I'll be specifying the column name in the Excel, which is activity name name.toString, and in the second one, student activities and the registered date. This one is of date type. So whatever the value that I'm entering, I need to convert that to a date format. And in the Excel, we have a date. So let's convert that. So how we are going to do that is by using datetime.pass and specifying the row and column name, which is the registered date string. This will convert the string that we are extracting into a datetime format. And the last column, student activities, which is the cost per month. and this one is of decimal type, and we have in the Excel like this. So we need to convert this to decimal. So again, just like we did earlier, we can say decimal dot cost, row cost per month to string. Now we have assigned the values to the variable that we have created, and again simply we need to use the same activity over here, create entity record, to insert the values we have in this particular data table for that particular student. So I'll be using create entity record again, and this time I'll be selecting student activities, and input record is going to be student activities data type variable, and I'll be assigning the output to the same variable. So this is how you enter records. So what will happen here is it will read the two sheets in that particular file. It will assign the values of the student to this variable, and it will create the record in the entity. Next, for the student activities, it will get the activities one at a time and insert each row into the next activity one by one, referring to the record we have created in the first entity. So we can run this and see. So we can simply, if I'm to show you, as of now we don't have any records in these two entities. So let's give this a run. So you can see the records are being added to the entities. So the process completed successfully without any errors. So if we get back to the data service and give it a refresh, we can see that we have new rows over here. So let's check the students entity first. And if you go to data, you can see the three records that we added from the three files. So for the first student, this is the information, second student, and the third student. So remember, in the Excel file, for the third student, we have only the student information, but we don't have the student activity data. So this is the Excel, and we don't have any student activities. So let's see how that has worked out. So get to the students activities now, and you can see the references has been built successfully, and we are seeing the references according to what we have in our Excel sheets. So the first student has only two records, the second guy has three activities, and the third one has no activities in the Excel, so we don't have any records in the student activities entity. So this is how you build a simple workflow to insert records into the entities we have created. So these entities can be related to each other, and that's how we build the relationships within the UiPath workflows. So in the next set of activities, we'll see how we can use this. We use the next set of activities to delete entities in a delete records in entities, or how we can query the records available in entities, and we'll basically look at how we can use the other four activities over here. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next set of videos to showcase how we can use the next set of activities. Until then, happy automation.